This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to a game day edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Jets back at it tonight as this lengthy January homestand continues. And tonight, the Vancouver Canucks and all the drama around that team comes to Canada Life Centre. Looking forward to catching up on the visitors and the soap opera that has been this season for the Canucks with our pal Matt Sekeres coming up in a little bit. We're also going to be welcoming in Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. We'll discuss a number of the latest Jets topics and look ahead to tonight's game. Maybe get into a little bit of CFL with Hammer. And then a little more football later on. John Hodge from 3 Down Nation is going to jump on. Interested to get John's take on what happened to the Minnesota Vikings over the past 8 days, as well as the latest on the Bombers, who did announce the signings of Shane Gauthier and Kyrie Wilson today, coming off Dylan Brooks. Dylan Mitchell, excuse me, not Dylan Brooks of the NBA. And, of course, Willie Jefferson back on the weekend. So lots of Jets content. We will touch on the Bombers and the CFL offseason. And we've got a ton of audio today from both the morning skate as well as hearing from Connor Hellebuck and Adam Lowry yesterday. So buckle up. It's going to be a great show. A huge one yesterday coming out of the weekend. After that big win against the Colorado Avalanche on Saturday. So everybody, welcome back. Great to have you with us. Shout out to the gang that's with us live on YouTube right now. Hit that thumbs up button and make sure you've subscribed to the channel if you haven't already. And a big shout out to all the podcast listeners hanging out with us as well, making Winnipeg Sports Talk a part of your daily routine. Listen, we're going to bring in Michael Remis and get right to it. Do want to thank the sponsors that make our program possible for all of you on a daily basis. Our great friends at Princess Auto, Coolbet Canada, Rollies Transfer, Manitoba Battery, fansfirst.ca, Canadian Club, Wallace & Wallace, the Winnipeg Jets, F Apparel, Little Brown Jug, Royal Sports, Boston Pizza, and we will get to a why not question of the day for not Autocorp, but Waverly and McGillivray. Let's get Michael Remis in here and get this show on the road. Remo, what's up?
Hey, what's up? You just mentioned Dylan Mitchell, the Bombers signed yesterday. Fit right in with the Jets, who have 3 players named Dylan. So a lot of Dylans here in the Winnipeg pro sports scene.
Yes, the more the merrier. And shout out to Brendan Dillon, who, of course, was part of the club for the last few years. Hey, listen, I know we're going to spend the majority of the program today on tonight's tilt, the latest with the Winnipeg Jets. Obviously, Sekeres is going to fill us in on the Canucks' crazy season so far. But I can't get into the hockey without first touching on last night's playoff game in the National Football League and an absolutely crushing end to what was a magical Minnesota Vikings season through 16 games. It is just insane that 15 days ago, the Minnesota Vikings beat the Green Bay Packers. Sam Darnold is getting carried around the locker room on the shoulders of his teammates as his very proud coach, Kevin O'Connell, looks on at just such a special moment. And now 15 days later, after 2 of the most horribly quarterback games we've seen in a long time, the Vikes are one and done in the playoffs after getting just blown out of the barn last night in Phoenix by the Los Angeles Rams. What an incredible just failure and just such a disappointment for the Vikings last night. I feel sick for their fans who had such a great run, and now it's over before it seemingly even started in the playoffs.
Yeah, an incredible season. I mean, we can't forget us 14-3. I mean, this was kind of supposed to be a rebuilding year with McCarthy coming in at quarterback, and you have journeyman Sam Darnold, who was a top pick before, but he's 27 now. He's bounced around the league, comes in, leads them to that 14-3 record. 4,300 passing yards, 35 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. But when the games mattered the most, like win for first place in Detroit and the wild card playoff in Arizona against the Rams, he looked like seeing ghosts, Sam Darnold, from the Jets and from the Panthers. Inaccurate passes, holding on to the football too long, taking 9 sacks yesterday. It was very rough, and Troy Aikman and Joe Buck kept calling out the Vikings play calling late in the game too, just going slow and kept trying to establish the run when you're down 3 scores.
Didn't it seem like there was just a white flag on it? I mean,
yes.
I couldn't believe, and listen, it was way more about Darnold and his terrible performance than KOC. And I love KOC. I think he'll be the coach of the year. I think he is, one of the brightest young minds in football. But at the end of the third quarter, they're down 3 scores. They sneak a ball ahead for a first down. There's like 40 seconds left on the clock. And they just take it to the end of the quarter. It was, they were essentially playing like it was a tie game in the first quarter. I didn't get that at all. And there was no real sense of urgency in the fourth quarter either when they were going. Part of me just thinks that he was absolutely resigned that they had already lost the game because the bottom line was Sam Darnold. It was like Cinderella, and it was midnight. The party was over, and the prince was not there anymore. And like the last 8 quarters of football, after putting together a season that legitimately had him in the conversations for MVP. Now, listen, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson were sort of on another level, but Darnold was there. The wins, most importantly, were coming. And, in the first quarter of that Detroit game, over and over again, trying to hit Justin Jefferson in the end zone, which he had all season long, couldn't make the throws. And then, yesterday, you mentioned Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, Remis. There was a time in the game where Troy Aikman was almost speechless as to how lost Sam Darnold was. If you recall, there was a screen pass that he put a good 5 yards ahead of his running back. And Aikman just sort of said, well, that pretty much tells you how it's going right now for Sam Darnold when you can't even complete a screen pass. And yeah, listen, all the jokes about the seeing ghosts again were out there. That was a full-fledged haunted house. He was a deer in the headlights and could not make quick decisions. Probably 5, maybe 6 of those sacks were probably on the quarterback, and he admitted to as much after the game. An incredibly disappointing end of the season for the Vikings. And on top of it all, Remis, as I tweeted out last night, I don't want to think about how much money these 2 ugly performances in prime time cost Sam Darnold, but it's probably in the neighborhood of 9 figures. Even if they had lost, if he had a strong or just an average game and they had played, with the Lions or played with the Rams, I think you would have seen a team, look at the body of work for this season and say, you know what, we're in on Sam and we want you to be our guy for 3 or 4 years at probably in excess of 40 plus a year. Now, I don't know where he's going to end up. And I was listening to Adam Schefter earlier today. He said he'll probably still be the number 1 quarterback on the market. But I think what that market is for Sam got cut in half, in 2/3 with that performance. And the one thing's clear for the Vikes moving forward, and you can kind of hear it in the resignation of KOC after the game, that the original plan with J.J. McCarthy being the quarterback of the future for the Vikings is very much the future for the Vikings. And I think it's most likely that Darnold is elsewhere to begin next season, and you might have Danny Dimes as the backup quarterback for J.J. McCarthy. But unbelievable thud that was heard around the Twin Cities in Minnesota yesterday as the Vikings ended in the most in typically painful Minnesota fashion as many Vikes fans have felt before.
Here, I follow Will Regatz on X-Hus. He's got this Minnesota sports misery list going back until 1991, the city's last championship with the Minnesota Twins. That's in the Big Four. I know the Lynx have done well, and PWHL as well. But look at this list, Huss. I know we got to move on to Jets, but check here. I'm trying to bring this up. Here, Huss, take a look here. We have, just going back to the 91, so many different things like Twins blow 3-0 lead, Wild set franchise record in points, take a 2-1 lead, then lose. Vikings win 13 games, bouncing them. I retweeted this. There's just so many levels of misery here. So lately, the latest one, Vikings become NFL's first 14-win wildcard team, blown out by the Rams in the first round of the playoffs. And I talked yesterday about the Chargers chargering. Of course, the Vikings, have a horrible fallout in the postseason, like you've seen so many times. I'll never forget being at the Jets game in 2015, watching Blair Walsh shank a 27-yard field goal.
There's just the Evander Kane game.
There's so many here. My other favorite one is last-second Nate Poole TD keeps Vikings out of playoffs in 2003, which actually changed the force-out rule. I mean, there's so many. There's so many here. Minnesota sports misery. So we'll pour one out for Minnesota as we move on to the Jets here.
As I said, I'm just feeling for Vike fans. I got a ton of fans. And, I'm a Chiefs guy, but, in the NFC, I'm always sort of pulling for them. This is a fan base that deserves it. Man City, Remis went down, all of that horror for sports fans in Minnesota, and you just sort of get that scar tissue built up year after year. And it's funny talking to some of them afterwards that, it was almost like they weren't expecting it, but now they look back and say, how stupid were we to get our hopes up? Anyways, ugly end for the Vikings. Be a very interesting offseason for Minnesota. But let's get to the game tonight. We've got Remis, is this the most interesting team in the National Hockey League coming as the visitors tonight to the rink?
Yeah, I think they've been up there with the Rangers this year as far as off-ice storylines. And I think this one hits home where you hear about two star players butting heads. They, not playing on the same line. I think when, talking about JT Miller and Elias Paterson, and when JT Miller, he had to take a leave of absence from the team, and Paterson really perked up. And when they're in lineup, Paterson really hasn't produced, and he signed the big contract last year, getting paid over $11 million AAV, and it's not going well. And this was a team I thought overachieved last year. That was, weren't they up there in their division? And, really strong season, but they just haven't been able to follow that up this year. And just so much chatter about off-ice stuff. But I think part of that, too, is you're having that chatter because they haven't produced on the ice. So there's a big second half here for them. They've had some injuries in goal. Thatcher Demko, he can't stay healthy, and it's Kevin Lankinen, who we'll see in goal tonight, who's had a really nice season for them. Phil Hronek, he's back on D. He was really strong last year, and they signed him to a contract. So I'm curious what Vancouver Canucks team we're going to get tonight, because it seems been a lot of up and down for them.
Yeah, we'll talk about it with the Sekeres coming up. Listen, people forget this was a 50-win team last year. They won the Pacific Division. They beat Nashville in the first round of the playoffs, and they took the Edmonton Oilers to a 7th game. And then obviously it ended at the hands of the same way everybody else in the West did to Connor McDavid. But right now they come in actually on the outside looking in, and I guess on some ways you can look, hey, they're right there. They're just 1 point back of Calgary. Although I think everyone thought Calgary would be way farther down in the standings, and the Vancouver Canucks would be probably a lot higher in the standings. But you miss Demko for most of the season, and they've been bailed out big time by Kevin Lankinen, who's going to get the start tonight for Vancouver against Connor Hellebuck. and Quinn Hughes. And we'll hear from Josh Morrissey talking about Quinn Hughes in a minute. But the drama of this team, and I think for Jet fans in particular that have heard it, I mean, it is so reminiscent to what we ended up hearing more and more about that sort of 2018-19 that sort of imploded from within, and went in that big skid in the second half of the season, and just we're never really together like you've seen, and it was a broken culture. Rick Bowness told us as much when he came in to take over the club in the aftermath of Paul Maurice leaving and Dave Lowry, and I think that was something that Maurice probably worked a long time to try to establish, but this goes back to sort of the Blake Wheeler and his captaincy and Patrick Laine and all of that. And listen, if the guys are hating each other and having major personal issues, it can really affect what happens on the ice and mostly affect everyone else around it. And as I say, we're going to get into that with Sekeres coming up a little later on. But let's start off with the coach tonight. And actually, Remo, we should say right away, I know there'll be some happy people in chat, a little change to the blue line for tonight's game.
Yeah, looking at the lines here, Ken putting them out there has Connor, Scheifele, Velarde, Ehlers, Lowry, Iafallo, the new look line from last game, Niederreiter, Kupari, Perfetti, Tony Nato, Gustafsson, Barron, and the D pairs Morrissey, DeMello, Sandberg, Pionk, and Stanley Heinola on the third pair. Hayden Fleury and Dylan Coghlan were the fourth pair, and Colin Miller skated in non-contact, so you really had no Nemestikov and no Appleton out there. And Ken also noting, Huss, that Ville Heinola getting a chance on power play too. It's going to be Heinola, Pionk, Perfetti, with Iafallo in the pot position and Niederreiter in front. So a chance here for the offensive defenseman in the AHL to show that he can do it at the NHL level. Now, I don't think power play 2, gets a ton of time, but hey, he's getting an opportunity there. Nice to see we'll see what he can do with it. And the Jets actually haven't got a ton of power plays the last couple of games, but they look to have a couple more opportunities with the man advantage tonight.
Well, I mean, big opportunity for Ville getting into the lineup first and foremost. And yeah, I mean, if he can show what he can do on the power play, maybe he shows even more value to the coaching staff and might get in on a little bit more of a regular basis. I mean, with Fleury coming back soon, with Colin Miller just about ready to come back, you can't count on more starts. You got to make it happen right now. And some people will say, "Oh, it's unfair. You should get more." I mean, listen, it's the reality of pro sports on a team that is trying to stay up at the top of the standings right now. And here's Scott Arniel on just why it's so hard to stay on top once you get there in the NHL, both in the division, but in the Jets' case, battling for the top of the league standings.
Probably the biggest thing is that you're getting the opposition's best every night. They know that if they don't come out strong and play to their strengths, that we can do special things against them, and that's probably been the biggest thing for me for the last 3-4 weeks. Is the teams that we're running against, they're making sure they're not giving us free ice, they're not giving us free opportunities. They're making us grind for everything, and you don't always see that over 82 games, but we seem to be getting a lot of the best of the opposition, which you expect, which is our guys love the challenge of it.
All right, one of the, there will be a focus on the blue line tonight. You've got two of the best in the game going head-to-head. It's either Lankinen or it's Quinn Hughes as the MVP. I mean, Lankinen has been so important in the absence of Thatcher Demko. But, I mean, you look at the scoring leaders of Vancouver and who's been playing each and every night with Paterson out, with JT Miller out. The guy with the C on his chest is Quinn Hughes. And here's Arniel on just a matchup of two of the best young defensemen in the National Hockey League. Hughes on the Vancouver side and, of course, Josh Morrissey wearing the heritage jersey of the Winnipeg Jets tonight.
They're awful lot alike. The thing about both of them, they always had the offensive dynamic, just ability to change a game, whether in a rush or in an offensive cycle. But the thing for me, for both players, and I don't know Quinn real well, but they're taken on the defensive side of things. It's one thing to be an offensive defenseman in this league, but to be able to take the responsibility to to go out like they both do and play against the other team's top offensive line. We've seen Josh killing penalties, as I know he does, the others for Vancouver. Taking all those responsibility and being an all-round defenseman has probably been the biggest growth for both those guys, and you can count on them in all situations, and it's why they're on the ice somewhere between 23 and 26 minutes a night.
Kind of a funny segue into Ville Heinola getting back into the lineup, because Ville, would be an offensive defenseman. But the biggest challenge for him right now is, I think, handling, the bigger, stronger forwards in the National Hockey League and being able to defend. But you also want to give a young player like that the opportunity to make the most of what he brings to the table. And that, as we just mentioned, would include maybe a little bit of power play time. And here's Arnie on getting Ville onto that PP2 group for tonight's game.
So, yeah, for him, it hasn't been one he's been able to get. So now with Vladdy, kind of the circumstances where we're at, didn't really want to break things up as it was kind of going, so he hadn't gotten a lot of opportunities. So tonight there, he's going to get some looks, and that's part of his his makeup and what he does. And if they get a chance tonight, hopefully that he can go out and show us what he can do and help us a little bit with his hockey skills.
And then can that translate to 5-on-5? Like when you get more touches, you get more confidence that trickles into your 5-on-5.
Yeah, that's I think that I think both work together. I think that if you're feeling it at 5-on-5, you get out in a power play and you have that confidence going. But you're right, the other way too. If you get out there and you get some touches, get some feels, and you got some space to work and maybe make some quality passes or plays or get some shots, it just leads into your 5-on-5 game. I think that's kind of in general our power play is that we always talk about is that it can't be a downer. The whole idea behind our power play is to boost us, whether you score or don't score. It's to boost your sort of our 5-on-5 game, and it certainly can happen for really.
All right, so there's the coach, Scott Arniel. Ville Heinola in the lineup tonight, playing with Big Stan, Logan Stanley on the third pairing, and will get an opportunity, if it arises, to get onto the ice with a man advantage with the second power play group with Vlad Nemetsnikov still out. Other than that, lines up front will remain unchanged after that defensive masterpiece the team put forward on Saturday night, including Nikolai Ehlers, along with Adam Lowry and Alex Iafallo. Josh Morrissey and Quinn Hughes, as I mentioned, will be gaining a lot of attention tonight. Morrissey was asked what he sees in the captain of the Vancouver Canucks.
Well, I mean, I think of him in a really high regard. Obviously, love watching him play. Try learning a lot from watching him play, to be honest. And, I feel like guys like him and Makar and those guys, everyone else is chasing after. So, but it's fun to, obviously play against them. And like I said, I watch, those guys a lot, Quinn and Kale and, lots of different guys around the league just to try to learn, see what they're doing. And, he's produced at a pretty insane rate for his whole career. So he's a great player and definitely have to limit his time and space today.
What are some of these subtleties that you study in him in particular?
I mean, he's a very elusive skater on the blue line. Obviously, when he gets the puck, he's tough to contain up top, and just his ability to spin off guys and make something out of nothing on the blue line is really dangerous. I think over the last number of years, you've seen the growth and evolution in the game itself, and I think for defensemen like that, it's a great time to be that style of player. And so just try and learn from those things. And like I said, I think the big ones are elusive skating and his ability to move on the blue line and make plays on the blue line.
All right, there's Josh Morrissey on Quinn Hughes. Both will be playing big roles for their respective nations at the Four Nations Cup, and both will be leaned on heavily by their head coaches this evening. Here's just a quick one from Morrissey on the challenge of the Vancouver Canucks, who are in town tonight.
Well, obviously we haven't seen them yet this year, but they're going back to last season. They're a really competitive team. they've got obviously some very talented players, and I think their structure has been really good over the last number of years. Again, just going back to last year, their competitiveness and defensive game is tough to play against. So we've got some big D, and we have to do a good job of getting to the net, but also limiting their free offense because they've got some top-end guys.
All right, so there's Josh Morrissey of the Winnipeg Jets. Now, earlier, Adam Lowry spoke, and, yesterday's conversation on the program coming out of Saturday night's win really did focus around just how well Lowry Iafallo with Nikolai Ehlers performed against Nathan MacKinnon. Of course, Ehlers having those 2 goals. Here's Lowry on the new line and playing with Nick Ehlers.
Yeah, I thought he did a great job. I think, sometimes I've gone out there and he wants us to hold on to the pucks a little longer, and, I'm making ultra safe plays, and, the whole thing is to not get scored on when they're out there. But, I thought he had a great game. Obviously, that first goal early on, really put us in the driver's seat, but it just plays away from the puck. We talked about staying on top of their speed, and with MacKinnon coming through the ice and McCarr kind of as that second wave of attack, and he did a great job as F3 or even when he was F1 or 2 reloading, and just the sorts that he made in the D zone. I think that's an area that we'll continue working on with him, and there's different reads that sometimes we will make based on who you're tight to and things like that. But I thought kind of going into that game that we weren't sure how the lines were going to look with Vladdy going out and no Appy, and I thought he really complimented me and Al, and he brings a different element. He's highly skilled. He's got great speed. He makes great plays with the puck offensively, but I think in that game you saw his defensive awareness, the smart, simple plays when he had to, and it's nice to see him kind of relishing that role.
All right, so there's the captain, Adam Lowry, and here's one more from Lowry. Coming out of the weekend with the Hellebuck shutout, the Hellebuck presentation and ceremony on Friday night, Adam Lowry was asked if Connor Hellebuck should be getting MVP conversation around the league.
Yeah, I think there's been other years that he should have gotten and hasn't. I think, sometimes they overlook the goaltending position, I guess, because they have the Vezina. But, I think when you think of MVP, you think of what that player means to the team. And in this sense, the goalie, he's incredible. Every stat, everything I look at, it's, he's top of the league. He's, he gives us a chance to win every night. We're where we're at in the standings largely because of, how well he's played. So, I think that certainly is a deserved chant. I think it's certainly deserved that he belongs in that conversation. Obviously, we have a long way to go, and, we're far off from the end of the year, but he's had an incredible start. He's had an incredible stretch, and he's had an incredible career. So, I think it's fair that he finally gets recognized and, kind of gets into that conversation, and how that plays out down the stretch, who knows? But I think he certainly deserves that.
There's Adam Lowry from the Winnipeg Jets. Now, Hellebuck did speak as well, and, we kind of looked back on the weekend, the Friday ceremony, and, of course, hearing the MVP chants at Canada Life Centre. Here's Connor Hellebuck.
That's pretty wild. It's pretty cool. The whole experience was awesome. The fans made it great. I knew they would, but the organization made it great. It was a really cool experience.
What are you going to savor most about that? Like when you pick out all the tiny moments within that whole ceremony.
There's nothing I can pick out all that. Just the whole thing. I was literally just a fly on the wall. It took me a full day just to really sit back and realize what happened and soak it all in. So, I'm very grateful for everyone around me, and they did a great job with it.
Good thing it took him a day, because as soon as that day of letting it soak in was finished, he was out there throwing another blank up against the Avalanche of all teams. Here's just Murat asking Helly about the video tributes that were a part of Friday's festivities.
I was going to ask you about some of the cameos made in the video. Let's start with Kinley. How was the translation of those marks for you?
Yeah, I don't know who translated that, but they spoke dog perfectly. No, it was great. The cameos are great, and Buff getting on there and saying "see you on the water" at the very end was hilarious, and just a little piece of everyone that helped me along the way.
For a guy like that who doesn't really do a ton of media, as you may be aware, what does it feel like to be one of the pretenses where he's like, actually, I'm going to do that one?
Yeah, it's cool. Messaged him almost immediately after and thanking him, and the first thing he said is, "Yeah, let's go fishing." So, I'm pretty excited and trying to make that work, and hopefully it's late in the summer.
Buff's ready to go, and as Hellebuck just said, hopefully it'll be late in the summer. That is that's the mindset of Connor Hellebuck right now. No big fishing trips planned until July. Hopefully after some big things in the Stanley Cup playoffs. All right, Jeff Hamilton's coming up. We're going to continue getting the latest on the Winnipeg Jets with Jeff and hitting a few topics. But first, we're going to head to Vancouver and welcome in Matt Sekeres. But with the game tonight, don't forget, everybody, Thursday night is our next game with the WST crew up in Section 316. If you haven't joined us for one of our Winnipeg Sports Talk Games of the Month yet, why don't you join us on Thursday? Now, we'd originally sold out the section for Thursday, but we ended up getting a few more seats, and I think we've got 6 remaining right now that we'd love to fill. So if you haven't already gotten tickets for Thursday night, go to winnipegjets.com/WST. Click on buy tickets. Click on the Seattle game on Thursday night. Your voucher, make sure you've got the Jets 360 app because you'll also get a free drink, a beer, whatever you want in your app as well. And then we'll see you in the bar 316 beforehand and hopefully continue our perfect record this year. All wins for the WST games of the month, and we're looking to make it 4-0. So winnipegjets.com/WST. Grab those final tickets remaining, and let's see you on Thursday night. Myself, Remis, and Connor will all be there with the crew in the section. I know Connor's looking forward to getting out of the press box for a game and hanging with the rest of us for it. I do want to give a big thanks to our friends at Rollies Transfer for their support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. And we're already seeing the Rollies Winnipeg Sports Talk truck out on the streets of Winnipeg. And I'll tell you what, if you've got to move in 2025, you can get that Rollies WST truck rolling up to your spot with the experts from Rollies and get the white glove treatment from most trusted name in moving in Manitoba on your next move. Family owned and operated for over 60 years right here in the Peg. Go to Rollies.com, click on Request an Estimate up at the top right. Let them, first of all, put in the promo code WST for a special discount on moving services and moving supplies. And then let them know when and where you're moving, when you need to go, and what needs to go. And the friendly staff at Rollies will turn it around with a great quote for you and get you locked in for your next move coming up in 2025. Moving this year, make it Rollies. Find out more, request an estimate today over at Rollies.com. It's bone chilling out there, gang, and some of you might be already regretting not talking to Donnie and the gang at Manitoba Battery to get you ready. But listen, it's not too late. And even if your car is sitting at home like a brick of ice, not only does Manitoba Battery have the best prices in town, period, beating the pants off the big box stores on batteries of all sizes, makes, and models for whatever you need, they've also got the best service in town. And while you might not be mobile right now, they are, and they will deliver those batteries to you for free anywhere inside the perimeter with any purchase over $60. It's just that easy. So you can pop down and see them. Free battery testing as well if you need to know whether you're going to be able to last the winter. Logan Avenue, Dovercourt Drive there in the south side of the city, or simply go to manitobabattery.com, order online, or give them a call, as I said, with free delivery with any purchase over $60. It's just that easy. Don't get left out in the cold. Let Manitoba Battery help you get through the toughest part of the Winnipeg winter. Find out more again at manitobabattery.com. And hey, big cheers to our friends over at F Apparel. Guys, if as we get into this new year, you are thinking about upping your menswear game, get on down to F Apparel at 190 Smith Street. Custom suits starting at $400. Chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and the best selection of menswear accessories around in the city. Also got great deals. If you've got a wedding coming up this summer, make sure to talk to the guys about a special discount when you get your suits at F Apparel for the wedding. 190 Smith Street downtown. For more information or to make an appointment to come in for a fitting, check them out online at that's EPHapparel.com. All right, Hammer coming up in about 20 right now, though. Let's head to BC and get the latest on a wild season for the visitors tonight, the Vancouver Canucks, with our old pal Matt Sekeres program. And it was great to see you at Grey Cup. Obviously, those of us here in Winnipeg didn't particularly like the way the game went, but I have to tell you, like yourself, being to a ton of Grey Cups, just an amazing time in Vancouver. I mean, they knocked it out of the park with the Grey Cup week overall. As I said, the only thing that could have been better was that 3 hours for Bomber fans at BC Place.
Honestly, Hustle, that was the best Grey Cup in Vancouver, period. I was so proud as a Vancouverite for the way the Lions pulled that off, because Grey Cup here can be a little bit difficult. It's often pouring rain in mid to late November, and of course the city's sort of so big that it doesn't really take over. But what an incredible fan festival they had here! Like, that was categorically the best that I've ever been to. They had so much going on. You didn't wait 1 minute. You didn't wait for a beer. You didn't wait to check your coat. I mean, they just had things working like clockwork. So yeah, really, really impressed. And it was fantastic seeing you and Michael and spending some time.
No, it certainly was a great time.
Friends from Winnipeg.
Yeah, we're hoping. I mean, listen, the sooner they can bring that big game back to Vancouver, the better after the time we had earlier. But let's talk some hockey.
Sure.
I would imagine Sekeres and Price business is on the upswing right now, thanks to the never-ending drama of the Vancouver Canucks. What has it been like covering this team for the last few months, Matt?
Well, my colleague and someone who worked in Winnipeg for a long time, Ed Willis, the author, released a book a few months ago, Never Boring, about the history of the Vancouver Canuck. And boy, how prescient it was, because that was on the eve of what was about to explode here. And that was this rift between Elias Paterson and JT Miller. So yeah, it has been a most exciting first half of the NHL season for the Vancouver Canucks. Not necessarily on the ice. They play rather low event hockey, as you will see tonight against the Jets, but off the ice, there has been all sorts of soap opera going on. So yeah, this is a market that is very attuned to their team and anxious to see how this is all going to turn out.
For those of us in Winnipeg, and especially those of us that have been covering the Jets through the NHL 2.0 era, there are some eerie similarities to the internal combustion that sort of blew up what was one of the best teams in the National Hockey League, coming out of the conference final appearance in 18, a great start to the season in 18-19. It just seemed like this team didn't get along. They were not a great team. They had a lot of great players, and they came up far short of what they were capable of. How long does this go back?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because, as we have gone about exploring this story with Miller and Paterson, more and more people who know the league and know your market and team better have mentioned they see similarities to what happened in the Jets room, where Blake Wheeler and some others ran what one person described to me as a hot room, right? A room where, veterans got on guys, and it wasn't most functional. It wasn't always most appreciated, and that there was a lack of team chemistry because of that. Now, the odd thing here in Vancouver is that JT Miller and Elias Paterson, this isn't new. We knew that these guys were total opposites several years ago. We knew that these guys weren't the best of buddies, weren't exactly going out for dinner on the road. Both of them had even acknowledged the fact that they just approach everything from completely different angles. JT is a emotions on your sleeve, rambunctious, impulsive sort of guy. He oftentimes lets emotion get the best of him, whereas Elias Paterson is completely the opposite. He is a very laid back, low key, private, sensitive, thoughtful guy. He's not the type of guy who's going to go into a room and blister the paint off the walls out of emotional erraticism. And he's not the sort of guy who's going to get on teammates, whereas JT Miller has no problem getting on teammates. So, yeah, it's been an interesting chemistry mix here. We think for the most part right now, things have cooled down a little bit, that the temperature is a little lower than what it had been in November. In fact, Hustle, it was Grey Cup Sunday when the Vancouver Canucks were facing the Nashville Predators with the puck drop just a few minutes after the game, after the football game next door at Rogers Arena, where JT had a poor game. He got benched in the third period. We don't know exactly what happened after that, but we do know that he took a leave of absence from the team shortly thereafter and wound up missing 10 games. And the general manager, Patrick Allvin, said he acknowledged that this was as much a team decision as it was a JT Miller decision, and said that he would be a better player and person because of it.
The Canucks had invested so much in Elias Paterson and JT Miller for that matter, but obviously a more recent and a bigger number for Elias. I think it puts everyone in a tough spot. Like, I have to admit, I've really felt for Quinn Hughes through all of this. Yeah. And for Rick Tocchet. But what seems to different, and I think this is just the nature of the Vancouver market, the Vancouver media, they've had to talk about this. I mean, the Jets just sort of went about the business saying, hey, what are you talking about? And people sort of knew what was happening. But, I mean, we've heard from Allvin, we've heard from Tocchet, and this has added a lot to the plates of everyone in influential positions on that hockey club.
It sure has. It's been a real leadership test of Quinn Hughes, who's just in his second year as the club captain. And you're right. I mean, first of all, Vancouver's a robust media market, a competitive media market. So absolutely, this was going to be a topic that got on the plates and got on the lineups for shows as they went about their daily business. But yeah, the odd thing has been here is that the general manager, Patrick Allvin, the head coach, Rick Tocchet, the captain, Quinn Hughes, all three of them have addressed this matter head on and acknowledged that, yeah, there is a clash between these two individuals, even while both individuals completely deny it, play dumb, effectively try and sweep it under the rug. So, the concern would be, if you're a Canucks fan looking in, the first step to solving a problem is acknowledging that you have one. And do Elias Paterson and JT Miller acknowledge that they have a problem here privately, even if they're not willing to do so publicly? But there have been some tough words from all three principals. Hughes met the media one day and just talked about how there are days where he's angry at different guys on the team, but you've got to channel that appropriately. Rick Tocchet has basically said he's tired of talking about this, and even admonished the Vancouver Media Corps, why don't you ask for JT? Why don't you ask for Elias? So basically trying to get reporters to ask them about it. And then Allvin on New Year's Eve went on a diatribe about how Elias has still got to mature and that he's still got to prepare in a more professional manner. So yeah, there's been a lot not only leaking out anonymously, but there has been a lot of information provided full on the record by club leadership.
Well, and Tocchet seems like such a no bullshit kind of guy. He probably can't believe that he has to deal with this stuff at this level for as long as. But I do wonder about the rest of the team. I mean, are guys either a PD guy or a JT guy, or the rest of them just sort of, rolling their eyes when this comes up and trying to do their job?
Yeah. First of all, Tocchet is so much a no bullshit guy that at one point he split them up on the power play, and the prevailing theory there was that he did so to show them how ridiculous this is, that you would split your two best forwards onto different power play units to prove a point to them about, look, it can't be this way. The whole hockey world is laughing at us when we do it this way. As for, sorry, what's the second part of the question there?
Well, just, the players, are they sort of lining up behind one or the other?
So, it stands to reason that there's a decampment here. We certainly haven't taken attendance yet in that regard. It's difficult to do so, but we do know that JT Miller has a band of players that follows him. We also know that Elias has some close associations in the room. In some case, you may have overlap here, like the Venn diagram. There are guys caught in the middle. And that's the big concern here, right? That they don't play for each other as a whole going forward. Not to mention the concern about if they do execute a trade for one of these two principals by the deadline, how does that leave the room? Will you have guys sitting there going, oh, I can't believe they traded so-and-so? In JT Miller's case, people believe he's a better playoff performer or has been a better playoff performer. In Elias Paterson's case, he's the better 200-foot centerman, and of course, younger and all the different elements that he has on his side of the ledger. So, yeah, this is a most tricky situation for Canucks management to stick handle. I think the prevailing wisdom right now as we stand here today is that it is most likely to be resolved in the offseason. JT Miller has a full no-move clause, so he would have to approve any kind of trade away from the Vancouver Canucks, whereas Elias Paterson has trade protection that kicks in on July 1st. So they have a window here between now and Canada Day where they can move Elias without any kind of input from his side of the ledger. The other consideration is how many markets would JT Miller be willing to waive his no-move clause for. So, yeah, big franchise-defining question and potentially trade here.
Well, and listen, I don't envy Rutherford and Alvin situation in this because, with the vultures circling and just based on just how good these players are, it's very hard to win a trade. And this is for a team that, still fancies themselves as a competitor, as a playoff team. Aside from all the drama, Matt, as we go into this, we're now in the second half of the season. The Canucks are on the outside in look of the playoff line, albeit very close. Where's the team at right now?
Yeah, well, the team's been Jekyll and Hyde. Look no further than this past weekend. They go into Carolina on Friday. The Hurricanes are starting third-string goaltender Dustin Tokarski, a 35-year-old journeyman. The Vancouver Canucks muster 14 shots, get shut out in just one of the most desultory performances you can imagine. And people were talking about it as one of the worst games in recent Canuck history. Then less than 24 hours later, after getting stuck in Raleigh by weather and landing in Toronto at noon for a 7 p.m. game, they go into Scotiabank Arena and they dominate the Leafs and come away with a 3-0 victory. So that has sort of been par for the course with the Canucks this year. The GM, Patrick Alvin, has even said, I don't like the fact that I drive to the arena every night and I don't know what I'm going to get. They have followed up like some incredible wins with some unbelievable losses and vice versa. And, in terms of, yes, they are trying to contend for a Stanley Cup, and that's what further makes a trade of one of these two individuals more difficult. And I'll give you an example, Andrew. So we've heard that the Columbus Blue Jackets are interested. The Vancouver Canucks need a top two center back if they're trading one of these two guys. They do not have a prospect pipeline with anybody who looks like they're going to be a first or second line center. And as you well know, if you give up one of those pieces in the National Hockey League, it is exceedingly hard to get one back. You either have to draft and develop one over the long term. Maybe you get lucky and somebody pops into free agency that you're able to sign over a host of other suitors. And then, the luckiest of all is, every once a decade, the Boston Bruins get crazy and trade a Joe Thornton, a Tyler Seguin sort of thing. But, that profile of centerman is so very difficult to obtain. So the Canucks need one back in any trade. Let's use the Columbus example. Adam Fantilli would certainly qualify as a future number 1 or number 2 NHL centerman. But are you ready to win a cup with him locking down one of those positions right now as a young player? Probably not, right? So it is steeped with minefields, any kind of trade. Your comment about it'd be hard to win one, it would certainly be hard to win one in season. I do think the Vancouver Canucks have pretty good pro scouting, and I do think in a cap world, you can trade the best player, get back a number of parts, and win the trade. Look no further than the Ottawa Senators and Erik Karlsson a few years back. But it's a very narrow channel to swim. And I think the Canucks are wrestling with that as we speak.
Matt Sekeres with us from Sekeres and Price before Jets Canucks tonight at Canada Life Center. Matty, before we go, I mean, there's so much of the oxygen is taken up by this JT Miller-Peterson conversation. I do want to ask you, though, where would this team be this season without Quinn Hughes and Kevin Lankinen in net?
Yeah, and both of those sentences have been uttered a fair bit in this market, Andrew, over the last 3 months. The short answer is nowhere close to the playoff bar. On any given night, Quinn Hughes can make you competitive. We saw that on Saturday in Toronto. I mean, he was just magnificent with everything he did, setting up goals and really being their catalyst offensively. And then on the other side of the equation, with Thatcher Demko missing the first 2 months of the season, they absolutely needed Kevin Lankinen because last year's playoff hero, Artur Shilovs, was not able to maintain the fine level he showed against Nashville and Edmonton in the postseason. And Lankinen came in as a veteran NHL goaltender and was, maybe not at Connor Hellebuck's level, but on that next tier down in terms of goaltenders over the first couple of months of the season. Backslid a little bit in December, but he looks like he's picked it up back here again in January. So, yeah, both of those guys have been invaluable. Who knows what Canucks goal prevention would look like without Kevin Lankinen there to bar the door, and God knows what the Canucks offense would look like without Quinn Hughes, because they're not exactly a high-scoring, high-danger team to begin with. In fact, they rank right at the bottom on a number of offensive categories, and the success they do have is more often than not driven by Quinn Hughes. They just don't have defensemen who can make outlet passes, transition rush chances, or any kind of flow up the ice. And so you will likely see that again tonight, Andrew, particularly if Philip Hronek isn't healthy enough to play. That is the one piece of good news here, is that Quinn Hughes' partner, their second best defenseman, and a guy who can trigger outlet passes and get the puck going the other way, transport it himself. He is set to return here sometime soon, and they desperately need him.
Hey, Matty, just one final one as we look ahead to the trade deadline. Canucks management has made bold moves in the past. Now, let's assume for a minute that JT and PD stay and they figure things out. Where else would Alvin be looking at, and do you expect them to be a busy team? Top
4 defensemen, preferably right shot, but that
sounds familiar.
Puts them in a queue with a whole lot of teams for a very scarce number of guys who fit that profile, who are going to be available by the deadline. It's funny because they also went into the season thinking maybe they'd like to upgrade at third line center, and while that may still also be an aim, they spent a lot of money in the summer on wingers. They're not all working out. Nils Höglander has had just a shockingly bad season. He was 24 goals last year. He's got 2 this year. He hasn't scored in 30 some. So another middle six scoring winger would be on the wish list as well. But it's a pretty sizable list. I think at best they're probably only going to be able to get 2 of those profiles, and we'll see if that's enough. And a difficult Western Conference that not only has all those fantastic teams in the Jets division, but if you make the playoffs in the Pacific, you're going through Edmonton, and we saw how that ended last year.
No doubt about it. Hey, Matt, always great to have you on the program and catch up. Continued success to you and Blake with Sekeres and Price, and enjoy the game tonight.
Thank you, buddy. Call anytime. Appreciate it.
All right, good stuff with Matty Sekeres. Appreciate him jumping on. If you all are looking for more on the Canucks throughout the year, head on over to Sekeres and Price, fellow TSN orphans from February 9th, 2021. Hammer's coming up right away from the Winnipeg Free Press. Let me give a big thanks to our friends at Princess Auto for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Of course, Princess Auto is Winnipeg, founded in Winnipeg, headquartered in Winnipeg, and of course, the premier sponsor of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Princess Auto Stadium. But Princess Auto is also the place that you'll find the best deals and the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is waiting for you at Princess Auto. Pop by and see them in store. Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, out in Brandon for you listeners in the Westman region. And, of course, you can always get those ideas percolating and shop online 24/7, 365 over at princessauto.com. Our friends at Canadian Club fired up for next year's Bomber season. We'll actually get into a little bit of Bomber news before the end of the show. But, of course, Canadian Club is Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, 12 months a year. And next time you are popping into your local Manitoba liquor marts, make sure you check out the Canadian Club display featuring the original Canadian Club, Canadian Club Classic, Canadian Club 100% Rye, and at your beer store, next time you pop in, keep your eyes out for Canadian Club and ginger ale, premixed cocktails in cans ready to go for you. If you're thinking Canadian whiskey, make it the original Canadian Club, available at your local Manitoba liquor marts today. 2025 is here, of course, and gang, if you have fencing or overhead door needs in the new year, there's only one place to go in Winnipeg, and that, of course, is Wallace & Wallace. They've been the leaders in fencing and overhead doors since 1946, serving commercial and residential customers. If your property needs the security and protection of a new fence, or if winter is doing a number on your old one, give them a call. They've got you covered with the vinyl, ornamental, chain link, welded wire, wood fences. And if 2025 is a time where you might be in the market for a new overhead garage door, let Wallace & Wallace help you out. They've got the largest selection in Manitoba, which means one to perfectly match your home and add value to it at the same time. Give Wallace & Wallace a call at 452-2700. The friendly Wallace & Wallace team will be happy to pop down and see you at your place and give you a free estimate. You can also pop in and see them online, wallacefences.com, wallacedoors.com, or in person at their showroom on Lowson Crescent, just off of Keniston. All right, let's welcome in from the Winnipeg Free Press, Jeff Hamilton. Hammer, what's going on? How are you?
Not bad, Hustler. Good start to the week. Feeling good. Playing well. Looking forward to the rest of the week. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And, it was great to see you in person along with so many of our friends from the Winnipeg media and so many friends of Ted Wyman. It was a busy weekend with the two games, but a great celebration of life for our pal Ted on Friday down at one of his favorite haunts, the Pyramid in downtown.
Yeah, I think we might have talked about it last week. If we didn't, Ted wanted a party and he got that. The Pyramid was a great venue. I can't remember the last time I'd been at the Pyramid. It'd been a while, from what I understand. It's not open regularly like it once was, just for some special events. So for them to be able to pull some strings and get that venue was perfect. Perfect atmosphere for Ted. Of course, there was lots of his family and friends, tons of our colleagues. It was a really great opportunity to swap stories, to share, stories about our buddy Teddy. I personally was one of the four speeches. Got an opportunity to share my personal friendship with Teddy and how he impacted my life. So that was a special moment for me. And obviously still very sad to not have him here with us any longer, and certainly miss seeing him as often as I would, and reading his stories in the pages of the Winnipeg Sun. But certainly a nice send off, if you will, as far as celebrations of life go. It was pretty rocking, man.
I will say, listen, it was a phenomenal venue. It was a great crowd. The band was awesome. Everyone was having such a good time, and they were killing. I mean, all of Ted's favorite kind of songs from like the 80s and whatnot. The one thing that I'm sure Ted was looking down upon somewhere that he was miffed about was, amongst all the displays of his work and everything like that, that fantasy football championship trophy should have been on display because you know that he's still smiling about
it's
beating
funny
all
you
of us
say
for
that, man, because like obviously I had mentioned how he defeated me in the finals of our in my speech, and it was a pretty cool, obviously a perfect ending to the season. But now that you say it, man, I wish you would have said something earlier. I think that definitely should have been front and center with all his other accomplishments, as you mentioned, were well on display. All his obviously, milestones in his career and all the places he went, all the cool spots, including several Olympics. And so there certainly was a really cool kind of display for Ted, but I'm with you, man. I think if we would have gotten our hands on that trophy, and it should have been not just on that table, but in a prominent spot, because, Teddy would have loved that.
Oh, listen, great job to you and everyone that organized it. And it was great to see, many of our media colleagues that we maybe don't see regularly all coming together to celebrate our pal Ted. As far as the weekend went, we came ripped over right after the hockey game on Friday night, and listen, the Jets battled back in the third period. The power play once again being a difference maker and getting the OT. It didn't go their way, and they got one out of the two. But holy smokes, you want to talk about following that up. Second end of back-to-back nights, playing the Colorado Avalanche, and Connor Hellebuck's had 6 shutouts so far this year. That one, ironically, against one of the most high-powered teams in the league, might have been his most comfortable. What a way to beat a team that you will be measured against now and in the playoffs, most certainly. But also doing it with a new look that involved Nikolai Ehlers getting a couple, playing with Adam Lowry and Alex Iafallo. One of the more interesting and certainly well-played games we've seen from the Jets all season.
Yeah, it's kind of feeling like, I've said this for a long time. I feel like every weekend is like the Golden Globes or the Academy Awards or the Grammys. I feel like they're every weekend. Feels like a Connor Hellebuck shutout is every weekend. It just feels like it's a given. It's funny. Obviously that was a great performance from that new shutdown line. I loved Nikolai Ehlers' comments after the game. I thought that was just as good as the display on the ice, and that he was up to the challenge. The guy that didn't view, not that, and I don't come from this place where a guy should be pissed off if he's a goal scorer and is asked to do a different role, particularly for a game as they try to reconfigure their lineup here, but just the gusto in which he answered. Like he was, not only were they able to chip in, but he was able to play pretty admirably in that role, to which Scott Arniel said afterwards that it made him think a bit. And who knows? I think that's kind of the beauty of it all, is that it's one game is obviously a small sample size, but you try. Paul Maurice used to say this all the time. He used to find these pairings, right? He'd see what the chemistry was like in twos and try to make his lines out of that. Well, I don't think that line was maybe something that has ever been drawn up really, and to see the kind of success that it had, I think that's a good sign that not that we didn't think Nikolai Ehlers had that arsenal, like that tool in his bag, but the fact that he can play with a guy like Adam Lowry, who isn't the fastest player, right? That's kind of been the story with Nikolai Ehlers. Well, the centerman needs to have blazing speed, otherwise they won't be able to keep up with them. Well, they kind of proved last game that that's not necessarily the case.
The fact that they were head-to-head against the McKinnon line all night and completely shut them down. And listen, Alex Iafallo deserves a lot of credit as well. That Absolutely. Dude is an absolute dog on the puck and on the wall and was an impactful player. But I'm sort of with you. God knows we've thrown around every possible line combination on this program over the last few years for the Winnipeg Jets, doing this show every day. And Ehlers with Lowry was not really anything that I think many of us considered. I wouldn't think just on paper that sort of makes sense, but I'm so with you. Like the way Ehlers reacted to it and what he said after the game really got me thinking. And now listen, maybe this, first up, I'll fully admit, huge Ehlers fan, thinks he adds so much to this hockey club. And it does concern me that maybe this is his last season with the Winnipeg Jets going into unrestricted free agency. And I think, listen, we haven't heard a lot about it. There hasn't really been any reporting on where things are at. We haven't heard that there's negotiation on it. And I think it's not surprising based on how the last few years have gone that I think the plan was maybe to play this season out and then see what's there. I can't help, and then part of it is, he hasn't been on the top line. He wasn't on the power play before this year. Well, Now he's part of the best power play in the National Hockey League. And, playing with a guy that is so important, that has turned into the player that Adam Lowry is, I have to admit, I couldn't help but think that, if this works and he's playing a more important role and he's doing well and he's on a more impactful, job, not just offensively, that maybe a change of role warm things up a little more as it comes to, potentially sticking around. I mean, listen, it's one game right now. And listen, there's a lot that goes into those details. But I guess the bottom line
sounds
is
a lot like Pierre-Luc
hurt.
Dubois, who wanted to be turned into the ultimate two-way player here in Winnipeg and stay here for a long time, right? That was a narrative that was brewing. Not trying to equate Nikolai Ehlers and whatever. I do think it is interesting that you mentioned that somehow a new defensively mind you, obviously there was a lot of offense there, but to be the team that goes up against the other team's top best, that's usually equates to top dollars if you're not considered a shutdown line. And I don't think that anybody would consider, Nikolai Ehlers limited to a shutdown role. In fact, that would be the role that people would probably be furthest from equating to him. He's more of the offensively gifted player. It is an interesting idea. I'd be curious to know what Nikolai Ehlers would think. Again, it's one game. I don't think we're looking at this, one performance against Nathan MacKinnon's line, mind you, a great line, as some kind of suggestion that that's going to be somehow copy and pasted 82 times a season. I mean, it's very likely that line could go up against MacKinnon and the Colorado Avalanche in Denver, in time here and get their lunch fed to them. That's just the life of the NHL. But I do think it's unique. If you look at, one of the teams I've kept an eye on here a little bit is the Florida Panthers. They've kind of, they have a lot of firepower up front, obviously a lot of skilled forwards. They've kind of separated their lines now. Like they've moved them into kind of like three lines here. You have Verhaeghe on that third line now. You have Tkachuk and Bennett on that second line, and you have Barkov, obviously, on that top line with Reinhart. And so, I'm not suggesting that the Winnipeg Jets are necessarily the Florida Panthers, but they do have a lot of firepower. And I think, while that top line has been incredibly productive, particularly this season. I think you look at that second line and you wonder where the scoring's been. This is an idea that maybe spreading out some of the wealth right into that top nine. Maybe because the reality is, I think the Jets have leaned on this traditional third line, if you will, shutdown role, is because obviously it's worked, and I don't think they've been able to trust their top end guys to play defensive hockey against another team's top end guys. So maybe there is a little bit of a mixture here happening, before our eyes here, that allows maybe some younger guys to come up, maybe guys to get different roles who are in the, who play more of a top six role and don't have to necessarily be on the bottom six. Again, I'm talking as if I'm pushing Nikolai Ehlers to the third line. I'm not. You could make the argument easily that could be the second line.
The second line all year.
That's
he
what
has
I mean.
Been on the third line.
Of course, that's what I mean. Is that so? Then you can have that third line, if you will, again, just going numerically here based on ice time, to be a more skilled line, right? And then you can actually have a top six line that you can trust competing against the other team's top line, right? That's really been the difference here, is they haven't been able to rely on Mark Scheifele and company as a centerman, as a trio, to shut down the other team's top line. Instead, they've had to work around it, right? And then that's allowed them for Adam Lowry to carve out the role that he's had for years. I mean, I'm saying stuff that's, obviously obvious here. So I think this might be, even if it is, again, a small sample size, it does show a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel of switching up maybe what the Jets have been doing. Now, the next question, Huss, of course, is do you want to switch up what they've been doing? The results have been there. The goals haven't necessarily been there when they needed them. So that's kind of where I see the value there.
I definitely wanted to switch up something with the Vlad Perfetti.
Oh, it's just not working, right? It's just, and the reality is the power play and that top line is working so well that you don't really have to, it's like that issue you have in your relationship where everything else is really good, but you kind of just keep digging, and eventually you're going to have to, it's going to be the elephant in the room that you're going to have to talk about. The reality is things have been going smooth in other areas that you've been able to kind of, ignore that problem that's staring you right in the face.
I mean, listen, a lot of credit goes to the Lowry and the player that he is now and that he's turned into. I mean, he's on a 20-goal pace. He's on 100%. Pace for about 50 points. And he has by far the most responsibility when it comes to the toughest matchups all year. And listen, no one questioned that. I mean, he's the best guy for the job and was playing with guys that were getting the job done. They were going to go ahead and do that. But for Ehlers, listen, big part of the power play, which is the best in the league. He's sort of been that offensive catalyst on that line. And listen, Cole Perfetti's in a funk right now where the points have been few and far in between. And I think we all realize that Vlad's done everything that's been asked of him, but probably on most contending teams is not a top 6 center. Moving Ehlers to this point, just why I wonder whether it changes his, and again, this is assuming this carries on for a while and they play together. Things could change on the weekend and we'll look back at this conversation and laugh. But if he is playing in a role where he's in these tougher matchups and he's playing with Adam Lowry and they can have a little bit of offense and he adds a bit more to that, but also gets to play a more impactful role, I can't think that does anything certainly to harm where he feels in it, because I think most players like that, like he's going to get paid, whether it's here or whether it's elsewhere. I mean, there's no question that there's going to be a nice contract waiting for him, but you get to this point and he's probably comfortable with a lot of his teammates, but you're thinking about, is the grass greener elsewhere? Well, it probably seems a lot greener elsewhere when you're on a struggling line and you're not playing as much as half of the forwards right now until you get out on the power play, as opposed to putting in. And I wouldn't have even really gone and thought this much about it if I hadn't heard the way he reacted to it and what he said after the game. And I tell you what, I'm really excited about these next couple games, assuming that this line is going to be kept together, to see if Ehlers can add a new dimension offensively to Lowry and Iafallo, and if they can continue doing what they did so well in the first night, which was shut down arguably one of the best lines in hockey.
It's interesting to talk about Nikolai Ehlers trying to add offense to, again, that third line when one of the biggest issues for the Jets is trying to figure out the offense on the second line. So I'm with you. I mean, I think at this point, I mean, obviously the number 2 center has been a massive concern. And if you had a better number 2 center, nothing against Vlad Namestnikov. Namestnikov has done a lot more than they've asked of him, and
you could have imagined when they got him.
100%. And then, it was like trading out. And don't get me wrong, the Jets have been good to Vlad. They gave him a hockey home after he was a suitcase for years, right? Yeah. He was a guy, I mean, and that's not even, I'm not trying to be insulting. That's a position that people want you, right? They know that you're like, but you were kind of just tossed around. So they gave you a bit of a hockey home here, and you've lived up to that. But the reality is there's a ceiling on Vlad. Like you've seen, like he's not going to get better. Like, you know what I mean? Like you might get better performances here or there, but he's not going to be a player that's going to take another step, or at least the step that you need him to take to be that number 2 centerman. So maybe we're seeing, again, like as we talk about ice time, Adam Lowry's line has always been the second line on this team, given their responsibilities and the ice time that they get. If you move him up, I think the fear again was always that if you broke Adam Lowry has been the one constant, right? As his wingers have gone on to sign, in some cases, lucrative deals on other teams playing in that role. He's been that constant. So the idea of removing him from that equation would be pretty daunting and would be arguably a philosophical change for the Jets on offense and how they want to go about their system. So it almost kind of looks like Adam Lowry is a fine wine and getting better. And if he can play, if there's a comfort there, right? One game, but if he can play that, with a guy like Adam Lowry, and Adam Lowry can continue to bring that level of offense, if he can create that space and time for a player like Nikolai Ehlers, that could be really dangerous. And then you start looking at the team a little bit, the team makeup a little bit differently. You can use the minutes a little bit differently. You can give opportunities. As I mentioned, the kids on the farm coming up, maybe there's that third young, exciting line that brings a lot of energy, right? Maybe you're not trusting them to be up against the team's top line on the other team, but maybe they're the 3 guys that know they're on the cusp of making the NHL and are are doing everything in their power and bringing the energy every night, right? Like, I mean, when you start blending a lot of guys who are getting pretty comfortable in the top 9, you don't get that element that you see on other teams. You don't get that element, again, you trade it off for talent, obviously, an established veteran presence. But I think there is something to bringing that youthful energy into your lineup and not stalling them on the fourth line and asking them to play a game that isn't their style of game. And so, again, I think we're opening up some possibilities here on one game, but I do think they're reasonable possibilities. Can I play host here for a second? Can I sabotage the situation here? How much do you think Nikolai Ehlers' next contract is? And if it's a different answer, how much do you think the Winnipeg Jets are going to be willing to pay Nikolai Ehlers?
Well, listen, let's just take a look at, he's consistently 20 some goals. I mean, 25, 29, 21, 25, 21, 28.
He's a point-a-game player this year. Is he one off or is he one up?
He is a point-a-game player this year. He's got 14 goals, 22 assists to 36 points in 35 games.
Okay.
He is 28 years old, so we're talking
on the right
about
side
a guy,
of 30, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. So, he's making
can play on the power play.
Now.
Kind of brings
Not
a little bit
of
play
on the
obviously.
power play.
Well, no,
I would argue that
he's great on the power play. Is a great on power play. Brings the level of tenacity that players his size don't bring. Now, I'm not saying that Nikolai Ehlers is going to be added to your tough guy list, but there is something to be said about a guy who plays that style of game and is still able to muck it up, right? Still able to is willing.
And the world-class speed too. I mean, is something is a premium right now.
Now factor in the other stuff, the injuries, right? The stuff like that. I'm not saying that he's necessarily that should be a massive hit on him. I don't think he's necessarily a band-aid. I think it's been a lot of bad luck in some of those situations, but he's not the biggest guy. So now that we
answer your question, I think he's getting a raise from 6 a year to probably the high 7s or maybe 8, and getting term, like basically 7 or potentially 8 years. I mean, maybe it's a little bit less on an 8-year deal, and that's just off the top of my head. I mean, if you kind of look at comparisons, and I think, that sort of money would absolutely be. I mean, if he went to the open market, I think you're probably looking maybe at even 8.5 on a 7-year deal, something like that. Like, what he has is incredibly valuable in the National Hockey League right now, and he has already completely changed the Jets' power play. I mean, listen, Gabe Vilardi and Shifley Connor, they've been brilliant, but those guys were on it last year, and it struggled, and maybe with a little bit of different coaching, and with Nikolai Ehlers in the mix, it is now the best in the National Hockey League, and he's also a guy that can drive a line. I'll tell you what, that number, if he can stay scoring at this rate right now between his 5-on-5 and what he does on the power play, and play a role with Adam Lowry and Alex Iafallo where he's on the ice more and showing that he can handle some of the defensive challenges that frankly weren't afforded him in the past, that number might go even higher, to be honest. And listen, let's face it, the other thing that will determine this, assuming that this all happens in the summer, is what happens in the playoffs. I mean, we've seen guys disappear in the playoffs, and certainly that did happen early on in Nikolai Ehlers' career. I mean, very early on. I think he's been way better in recent playoff series before. But a big playoffs and having some team success as well can have a massive effect on it. But bottom line, he's going to get paid. He's going to get a lot of years. And the big question is whether the Jets feel that they can keep him. They've also got a big contract to Kyle Connor to give out the year afterwards. And listen, if he walks at the end, no harm, no foul. A great draft pick, an incredible career here for, 10 seasons as a Winnipeg Jet.
Wow.
You'll take that every single time. But, watching what...
Oh, see, Jeff, seems like once a day here.
I'm on.
We've had this with Hustler been watching the last couple of days. I don't know. Maybe we have to call the internet fairy and get this sorted out. What was Hustler talking about there? I missed.
Am I still on? Am I still on camera? Are we still on camera?
Yeah. We're here. It's me. It's me and you now. I got to step in.
We were just talking about Ehlers and the cost of me. I'm with him in the sense that I do think that Ehlers is a guy that will warrant a high price tag. It's fascinating though. Like to me, Huss said even more potentially if they could establish. And again, I think we're taking one game here and we're making a bit of a mountain of a molehill. But I do think that if that was the offer to him, like, do you want to play stronger defensive hockey? You know what I mean? Like, that's a tough style of game to play, Like, I mean, it might feel great against the Colorado Avalanche and shutting out Nathan McKinnon in a game, and you can really, you can get into the front of the microphones afterwards, 3-0 shutout, obviously a lot of emotion from Connor Hellebuck's 300th victory, and then talk to reporters about how great it felt to play, 200-foot game against one of the considered Stanley Cup contenders. But to have to play that style of hockey all the time, like, I don't know if that's a great sales pitch. Like, what if another team goes to him and says, well, you can play in the top 6 top end power play and with these 2 players? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of one of those. But here's the thing, and I think we saw it with Jacob Trouba. I think we've seen it with players in the past who have wanted to leave Winnipeg, who now kind of go, whoa, I'm, kind of wish I was part of that, right? Like, it's not very often you have that many guys sticking around that long. And it's, those are the same guys that were around when I first got here. And then you get a little sentimental. Like, I know that's going through Jacob Trouba's head, right? Like, and other guys. So the grass isn't always greener. And so I think, I to your point, Haas, I think it's a great one. I think, you mentioned playoffs. I think it's more than just the playoffs and how far they go. Like, I don't think it's like, okay, you probably need to get out of the first round here. But I think it's how Nikolai Ehlers is going to be feeling. Because I don't think that Nikolai Ehlers has been feeling all that. I'm not saying he's been like, down in the dirt and jaded and all this stuff. I'm not suggesting that. I just don't think he's felt like he's been the priority in the organization.
Yeah,
all these guys
a part of it
ahead of him, right? And you can make that argument. For years, Nikolai Ehlers was on the trading block. The Jets talked about him as a potential guy to trade when they were figuring out who they could keep and who they could go. And a big reason of that is because people were calling for Nikolai Ehlers. People liked his unique skill set, liked what he brought to the table. So that, and so like it'll be very interesting. We also know the relationship that Blake Wheeler had with Patrick Laine. Well, big part of that was playing video games with Nikolai Ehlers to the wee hours. So Blake Wheeler not being in the room anymore is an advantage in that leverage in those negotiations. So it's been a very, very interesting run for Nikolai Ehlers in Winnipeg. There's been lots of highs. There's been a bit, there's been a few lows. And I think what it's going to come down to is, yes, of course, opportunity. It always comes opportunity, and money is obviously super important. But I think it's going to come down to how he feels he's been treated. And I think if you look at this year, he's been treated differently. They've got the bonus and benefits of his on ice play, and maybe that in turn decides on how long his time in Winnipeg will continue.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I see some differing opinions in the chat, as we always have. Here we go. Why not question of the day for Not Autocorp at Waverly and McGillivray. In the chat, some disagree with me. What do you think Ehlers, like what's Ehlers' contract? AAV and how many years? Whether it's with the Jets or whether it's with somebody else, what do you think he's getting next
They're
week?
disagreeing with you because they felt you lowballed him?
I'm not sure. Well, listen, that's the funny thing about Ehlers. Some people think yes, and other people think we're selling him short for what he's capable of doing.
I think you're right where you should be, not because I think he could get more on the open market. Like, I think there's a team out there that will give him $9 million. But I also think that in Winnipeg, like everybody else for the most part, is now working at 8.5, right, and down. Right, like nobody is getting paid more than Connor Hellebuck. Nobody's getting, they'll make the argument about no one getting paid more than Mark Scheifele and those things. So
see if that works for Kyle Connor.
Well, there you go, and that's going to be the ultimate test. I don't, and I think it will work for Kyle Connor. I don't know. Now, I'm not trying to put words in the Jets' mouths, but if they had that, Kyle Connor isn't going to go in to February or January now, likely most of his last season without a contract. Like, I just don't see them doing that. And I think that will be the big difference here. But again, that's part of Nikolai Ehlers' control too, right? We can't just say that the Jets haven't been interested in signing him to an extension. You need two parties to dance here. So I think that's, but it will be interesting. And I do think there would have been, I'm not suggesting there is right now at this moment, but there would have been a need for the Jets to mend whatever feelings that Nikolai Ehlers had about his playing time and his role within the organization. And that's ultimately what you want to do, right? You want the money, you want the term, but ultimately you want all of that and a feeling that the organization wants you. And usually the good news, Huss, is if you can get the first two, usually the third one's pretty obvious that they want you.
Yeah, no, it is a great point. Jeff Hamilton with us. Hey, I'm going to talk a little football with Hodge coming up in just a minute. Just before we go on that, we've seen some signings. Gauthier, Kyrie Wilson coming back. I don't know, we'll be reading this in the Winnipeg Free Press, but OC, what do you anticipate happening soon? And are you surprised that the openings with the Bombers have gone as long as they have without getting filled?
I'm not surprised. I'm partly convinced that Mike O'Shea is trying to convince Zach Collaros to be OC and quarterback. You know what I mean? Like that seems to be the player
plan?
promotes the succession plan. No, I'm kidding. I am a bit surprised in that you'd think that because the Bombers have had those roles in place during their preparation time, we hear a lot about the offseason, really, especially at this time of year, getting down. You see it across the league, making trades, making signings, securing the guys that they want, all those things. I do think an OC is important. Obviously, I think you want that input. Dylan Mitchell signed. I think Mike O'Shea had made a bit of sense, obviously, in that players want money and they want to. Doesn't really matter, exactly who the OC is per se. Now, I don't buy that completely. I do think if you have an OC that players really want to play for or have a relationship with, that would make it easier to get them. Now, there's also the chance they don't like that OC, but I'm not overly surprised by it. Mike O'Shea is, not the greatest when it comes to change. He'll go through his own process the way he wants to. He won't follow anybody's, necessarily advice. He'll do it the way that he wants to do it. And, I won't be surprised. They've obviously had a couple of different interviews. I've heard Jarius Jackson was close at one point, but he hasn't been hired. We heard today that Mike Miller from Toronto was interviewed. There's other guys. Obviously, Jordan Maksimic was interviewed by the Bombers before he took the job in Edmonton. Like, there's some usual suspects out there. I imagine it will get done. It has to get done, in my opinion, before free agency and well before that. So if I had to guess, I would say another week or so. But that would be in line with some other organizations too. Like, not everybody has finalized their coaching staffs, but it is an interesting one for sure. And the business, I think you need to have your offensive mind in place to give an idea of how Mike O'Shea says he knows how he wants his offense to play, but that's, I think, more through like Zach Collaros' style play and Brady Oliveira's style and his O-line and whatnot. They have a certain personality, which tells me that they want that person to come in with that personality, right? So we'll see what happens. It takes time, but I don't see it taking too much longer.
Hammer, great stuff as always. Thanks for doing this, and we'll catch up soon. Be well.
Yeah, right on. John will fill you in with the rest. I'll talk to you guys later. See you next week, Husson.
Yeah, first I want to get John's takes on the in what the hell happened to Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings yesterday. We'll get to that in just a second. John is on deck. I do want to quickly get to fan feedback for fans first. A lot of comments in on what an Ehlers contract would look at. By the way, I'll plug, and I know we're going to have Murat on the show a little later on this week. Murat's got a really interesting article in The Athletic right now on all of these pending RFAs and UFAs and sort of a prediction of, what these next contracts are going to be. And for what it's worth, the Evolving Hockey offseason projection for Nikolai Ehlers was $7.6 million on a 5-year deal. Murat and The Athletic, based on this season and as of right now, has updated that to 8.4 AAV on a 5-year deal. So again, with more term, that number might come down a little bit. But anyone that was thinking you were going to get Nikolai Ehlers for $5 or $6 million, that ain't happening. Let's get to fan feedback, brought to you by Fans First, your number one spot for buying and selling Winnipeg tickets on the resale market with no fees, period. What you see is what you pay when you're on fansfirst.ca, and certainly your best option for selling extra tickets that you may have as a season ticket holder. It is the only place I will ever put tickets up if I need to, if I've got a couple extras. All right. Contracts for Ehlers. Darth Skater, 8x7. Less, 8x8. If Tyson Ducharme, if I'm Ehlers, I take the most money and run. Get that first line minutes. Rat River Rebel says, you get 8.5. You get 8.5. Everyone gets 8.5. Mike B. Ehlers seems like 7x7, but I bet he could get more elsewhere. Ed Miller Time says, this is a good point. The cap is going way up. We can afford some of these big hitters. There are, in that article, as I said, we'll focus more on this later on in the week, but there are projections for Sandberg, for Velarde, for Alex Iafallo, and I still see Phyllis is a 7.5 by 7 for Nick, and I know she would love that. Because that would keep one of her favorite players here for a long term. Fan feedback brought to you by Fans First, your number one spot for buying and selling Jets tickets on the resale market. By fans, for fans, no fees. Check out the site today over at fansfirst.ca. All right, just about ready to bring John Hodge in. Let's give a quick cheers to our favorite local brewery, Little Brown Jug.
You train day in and day out, learning new techniques, approaching new concepts, and living out the thrill of achieving your goals. Building a craft beer is no different. While you spend your hours on the ice, we spend ours here, brewing our trademark beer. Again, and again. Here's to pushing the status quo and challenging ourselves to build something memorable. 1919 by Little Brown Jug.
Well, for all you Viking fans who got together with your friends at Boston Pizza yesterday to watch the Rams-Vikes playoff game, at least you were at BP and could order, world-famous BP wings, gourmet pizzas, and some ice-cold schooners, because what you were witnessing on the television was an absolute disaster for the second straight week after a 14-2 season. But there's 8 teams remaining in the NFL playoffs. For my money, the best weekend of the year. We'll get to the latest lines and matchups when we do our Coolbet segment at the end of the program. But make your plans to get down to Boston Pizza with your crew for 4 NFL playoff games this weekend. More chances to win great prizes at BP. And, of course, when the Jets are on, the game is on at Boston Pizza with big sound. Your chance to win pick-a-player contests and more at your local Boston Pizza. And, hey, I know it's cold right now. If you do just want to get it hot and fresh to your door, order online at bostonpizza.com. And a big shout out to our friends at Royal Sports. Yes, there are 8 teams remaining. If you are going to a party or you need to rep the colors of your team, Royal Sports has all your NFL gear, in addition to the biggest selection of Winnipeg Jets merchandise in town. Tons of exclusive Bomber gear and a new hat wall featuring exclusive Jet hats you will not find anywhere else. Perfect for the Jet fan in the family. Also, the original hockey superstore with over 40 years in the business, with hockey players working to help you get the best equipment and make the best choices, and so much cool stuff on the King Skate, Snow, and Surf side. You got to see it for yourself. 750 Pembina Highway, Royal Sports, King Skate, Snow, and Surf, and follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Winnipeg for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. All right, let's get John Hodge in here. John, great to talk to you. I want to get to some CFL topics, but I know you follow the NFL closely. I mean, what do you make of the last 8 days or 9 days for the Minnesota Vikings, who went from the number 1 seed in the NFC to being trounced in 2 straight games and now on to the offseason? Oh, wait a sec. I think we got you muted.
Oh, I'm talking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you were good.
All right, cool. Is it really that surprising? Like, is it that surprising?
I mean, if you watch this team this year, I would say yes.
It's Sam Darnold
was in the MVP conversation. He was awesome all year long.
It's Sam Darnold, and it's the Minnesota Vikings. Like, this team beat 3 playoff teams over the course. Well, actually, that's not true. They won 3 games against other playoff teams. 2 of those games were against the Packers. and they won those games by a combined total of 4 points. And the other one came against Houston in week 3. So when you've gone 3 months beating one other playoff team, and it's a divisional game that you're playing at home, and you win by 2 points, that doesn't resonate with me. Like, yes, whoa, let's put the Vikings on a pedestal because they beat the Colts and the Jags and the Titans. Like, I don't understand what this buzz was. Like, this team was going to have to show it come playoff time, and they folded like a cheap tent in the last game of the regular season against the Lions. And then they stunk out the joint against the Rams, a team that is playoff battle tested as much as, yes, they have had at least one down year since winning the Super Bowl. Like, I don't follow the Vikings super closely. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on their season, but I didn't think that they were that impressive. Yeah, it's cool to win 14 regular season games. Like, that's great.
Yeah, most ever by a wild card team in the NFL history.
Okay, and that's a byproduct of playing an easy schedule, but having a dominant team in their division, who, by the way, swept them in the regular season, including, like, terribly in the last game of the regular season. So, no, I'm not that surprised about the Vikings.
That was the toughest division in football, by far.
Okay.
By far. And here's the thing, and I don't even know whether we can really say much about the rest of the team. I mean, Sam Darnold went from a guy that was playing at an MVP level to a guy that, I mean, couldn't complete a screen pass last night. I mean, like, I think about the first quarter of the Detroit game and how many times, like, he had Justin Jefferson open and passes that had completed all year long routinely that he was just missing. I mean, he was really off. And I think they sort of gave him a mulligan. Hey, tough spot, but whatever. You're going up against a Rams team that, you know, defensively had not been a juggernaut this year. But like, I was just absolutely stunned at how incompetent he was last night. And you know, it was all the stories about, you know, we remember the ghosts. I mean, he was just like a statue there, getting sacked over and over again. And as I said to Remis at the beginning of the show, even the touchdown pass that he threw to Hawkinson was a terrible pass. It was behind him. It was on his butt. He was lucky that it wasn't broken up or maybe even picked off. So I don't know. I feel for the Vike fans because they legitimately had reason to be pretty excited, and holy smokes. And I mean, for Darnold, he probably cost himself 9 figures, if you can believe that. Like,
I don't disagree with that. And let's also, by the way, give a huge shout out to a couple of Canadians who were hugely impactful along that defensive line for the LA Rams in Michael Hoyt, a Brown graduate who was raised primarily in Southern Ontario, and of course Neville Gallimore, an Ottawa native who was a 3rd-round pick to the Cowboys a number of years ago, did not get a second contract from them. I never really understood that, to be quite honest. I think he's going to get paid on this next deal. He was a monster last night for the Rams. Unbelievable.
Dude,
like, he
looks like the biggest,
athlete.
Baddest dude on the planet when he got up afterwards. I'm like, that is the most intimidating individual I think I've ever seen.
Neville Gallimore is a freak athlete for his size, and he should be starting for an NFL team full-time, and he should be making, I'm not saying he should be making $10 million a year, but he should be making good NFL money. Here's the other thing I'll say, Huss. I think Sam Darnold is a great story. He was put into a very difficult position with a loser franchise, let's just call it that, in the New York Jets at the age of 21 back in 2018. And I think he is a good example of how great coaching can make or break a player. He did not have a good supporting cast. He did not have a great coaching staff. He was put in a position to fail. And it's wonderful that he got the opportunity to do something different and to try to succeed here in Minnesota. And credit to him, over 30 touchdowns this year. That's nothing to sniff at. But at the end of the day, when you are something for 6 consecutive years, I don't think that you can flick a switch and become a perennial all-pro randomly at the age of whatever he is now, 27, 28 years old. To me, there was always going to be at least some regression to the mean. I'm not saying he was going to be, the Cinderella carriage turning into a pumpkin overnight. But that is what happened at the end of the season. And no, I don't.
Full pumpkin last night.
It was
full pumpkin.
Well, and you never go full pumpkin, right? And he went full pumpkin, right? Is he better than he showed? over the last 2 games of the season? Yeah, I think so. But again, it's Sam Darnold. Was anybody expecting him to be Patrick Mahomes? If so, just shake your head.
There's only one Patrick Mahomes. We all know that. Hey, listen, just before we get to CFL, as we get closer to the weekend, we've got 3 pretty big spreads, but I'm interested in what you're expecting and who you're riding with in the main event on Sunday night, the Bills and the Ravens, in a matchup that's really seemed like it's been on a collision course ever since the Chiefs sort of got the upper hand and we're going to get home field.
I mean, I'm with the Ravens. I think the Ravens are the better team. That being said, I am on the record as saying I'm hoping for a Bills-Lions Super Bowl, because I think that the fans in those markets, 2 kind of underdog, northern, tough markets, I think are well deserving of at least a Super Bowl appearance. I know the Bills have done that 100 times before. They've just never won it. The Lions, I don't think, have ever been to a Super Bowl.
No.
So that is the game that I think would be best for the NFL. That is the game that I think would serve the fans the best. However, I've been fearful for quite some time now that we're going to get a Rams-Chiefs Super Bowl. And I suspect that we're going to get a Chiefs-Ravens AFC Championship game, which, while tremendously entertaining, is something that we've already seen before. Like, we've seen Lamar Jackson and we've seen Patrick Mahomes this time of year, but I think that's what we're going to get. That being said, I think this week, I think the Ravens will do it. I just think Lamar Jackson is, he's just stupidly good. I don't know how else to say it. He was an absolutely, he routinely makes exceptional NFL defensive players look stupid. There's no other way to say it. He is just dominant. He is a magician. When he is on, I just feel lucky I get to watch him play. I'll put it that way.
The thing. Historically, he's come up very small in the playoffs.
Yes.
He was 2-4 coming in, and obviously you beat the Steelers and Russell Wilson. They're on the road. They got to go to Buffalo. If they win, likely going to Kansas City. If he can slay those demons, the entire narrative about Lamar will change, in that a guy that's, he's got the 2 MVPs, but, show me when it counts against the best teams. He has that opportunity, and man, that is going to be a fun game. Taking it back to the 3-down game, been a bit busier of a time for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. We saw the signing of Willie Jefferson, which was, I think, expected. A couple more today with Gauthier and Kyrie Wilson, I should say.
Yeah, they've not signed Kyrie Irving.
I kept, when I also called Dylan Mitchell Dylan Brooks a little earlier, so I don't know whether I've got NBA on the mind, but tell us about the Dylan Mitchell. First of all, the fact that he was available right now, and how much do you think this has to do with the rookie getting the opportunity to head down for NFL workouts?
I think it certainly plays into it. Ontario Wilson was a 1,000-yard receiver as a rookie this past year, and the Bombers really needed that, right? Obviously there's the injuries to Kenny Lawler and Dalton Schoen that had them both out for very, large portions of the season. But then there's also the salary cap, right? Kenny Lawler made a boatload of money this past year. Dalton Schoen made a boatload of money last year. They needed somebody to come in on a rookie deal and be impactful. And they tried out some other guys. Carrick Wheatfall got a good look. None of them worked outside of Ontario Wilson. He was the guy. And Pokey parlayed that into an opportunity with the New York Jets, which is fabulous for him. 25 years of age. He deserves that opportunity. As for Winnipeg, I think the reason Dylan Mitchell was available is because Ed Hervey went on an epic rant today. We've got the full article up at 3downnation.com. My colleague Justin Dunk reported it. It was phenomenal. He was asked essentially, is the team going to bring back Eugene Lewis? And he made it very clear that despite the irony that Ed Hervey himself was a receiver, he does not believe in paying big dollars to receivers. He wants that team to get better along the offensive and defensive lines. And Dylan Mitchell is a bit of a unique case. He was a 7th-round pick in the NFL draft to the Minnesota Vikings in 2019. And I'm not telling stories outside of school here. He's spoken to the media publicly about this before. He was suffering from an alcohol addiction at that time, and that was what kept him, I think, kind of thwarted that opportunity for him, kept him out of the league for a couple of years. And then he comes up, gets sober to the CFL in 2022, and all of a sudden pops off. And let's be clear, Mitchell was a first-team All-American, at least within the Pac-12 conference, at the University of Oregon. Like, he was a big time collegiate player, and he pops off as a rookie with the Elks as a receiver and returner in 2022. And they signed him to a big money extension, right? That was the Chris Jones first year there. They were looking to reestablish everything. They gave Mitchell this deal. He was heading into the third and final year of that deal. I think he was probably overpaid for what he was realistically producing. He was not bad this past year, but he was under 800 yards in 18 starts for that team. And so I think that's the reason they moved on. And I think Winnipeg was smart to scoop him up. I think he's going to be making less in 2025 than he did in 2024. I do think the receiver market is coming down as a whole. So I don't think the Bombers had to break the bank to bring Mitchell in. And I think he is a good insurance policy, not only for Pokey Wilson leaving for the NFL, but also in the instance that Winnipeg loses either Kenny Lawler or Dalton Schoen to the free agent market.
Well, where are you at on the likelihood of Lawler, Schoen, or both? And while we're at it, Pokey Wilson, I mean, he'll get these workouts. If he doesn't sign an NFL deal, would he be back?
Well, Pokey has signed with the Jets. He is under contract in the NFL. That said, his contract with the Bombers goes through 2025. So if he is cut by the Jets and he wants to come back to the CFL, the Bombers hold his exclusive rights
I got you.
through February of 2026. And he would have to come back to the team under the terms of his original deal. So he would not be making a ton of money unless the Bombers wanted to sign him to a long-term extension if he came back partway through this upcoming season. That being said,
that would only be, basically you're going, like, say he was a training camp cut or something like that. Yeah. You're still talking about the first half of the season for sure. So the Bombers need to plan for this season, not having Pokey Wilson in the mix.
Correct. I think if he comes back, you'd consider it a bonus, if anything else. So we have seen that happen. I mean, Lawal Uguak was a Canadian defensive lineman. He got into camp with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this past season, went up to the Montreal Alouettes again, partway through the year after he got cut. Like, we do see these mid-season kind of re-additions, if you want to call them that. Austin Mack did the same thing after participating in training camp with the Atlanta Falcons, but you can't count on those things, obviously. I'll say this. I asked Kyle Walters point blank via video conference earlier today. He's attending the CFL's off-season winter meetings in Charlotte, North Carolina. I said, can you get Kenny and Dalton back? And he said, well, we didn't think we'd be able to last year, especially with Brady being a pending free agent, and they ended up getting everybody back. So he's not ruling it out. Do I think it's realistic? I honestly think maybe. I mean, again, I talked about the receiver market coming down, and let's go through the history here. So Chris Jones blew up the receiver market when he brought in Kenny Lawler back in 2022. Kenny Lawler made it very clear he did not enjoy that experience. He came back to Winnipeg in 2023. That being said, Chris Jones blew it up again in 2023, signing Eugene Lewis to a 2-year deal worth over $300,000 per year. That is crazy money for a receiver in this league, or really any non-quarterback in this league. Ed Hervey has made it very clear that he is not going to sign Eugene Lewis to a deal worth anywhere near that money. It should be noted, he paid Tim White in and around $220,000 to return to the Hamilton Tiger Cats this past offseason when he was the GM with the Tabbies. But he interestingly said that that was part of an organizational decision. He said, well, I did that because the organization wanted Tim White back, which to me is Ed's way of saying somebody above my head said, hey, you've got to get Tim White under contract. I don't care if you think he's worth this amount of money or not. So if the receiver market is coming down as a whole, my point is the Bombers might not have to pay Kenny Lawler $265,000 to come back. They might not have to pay Dalton Schoen, especially coming off a torn ACL, $235,000 to come back. Like, Nick Dembski is supposed to make right in that $200,000 mark. If I'm Kyle Walters all day, I'm going to Kenny Lawler, I'm going to Dalton Schoen and saying, hey, we're going to pay you the same as we're paying Nick. Because if you can get those three guys under the same dollar figure, eliminating maybe some competition in the locker room, especially, again, with both of those receivers coming off injury-plagued seasons, which I do think will hurt them at least a little bit in negotiations, I think that would be a pretty slick way for Winnipeg to keep all of their targets available for Zach Collaros.
All right, I want to ask you about the quarterback position in a second, but first up, are you surprised? We asked Hammer this before that we're still in a situation where there is no offensive coordinator for the Bombers, and you hearing anything on who might that guy be?
Well, I've been checking in with some of the individuals who I suspected would get consideration for this offensive coordinator position. And by and large, they have been telling me that they have not had contact with the team. Now, I asked Mike O'Shea about this via video conference on Monday. He said that he's happy with where they are in the process, but he did not set a timeline for when a hiring could be made. I also asked, well, has the formal part of the interview process started? And he kind of chuckled and he said, well, your definition of formal and my definition of formal might be two different things. I'm not really sure what to make of that. I don't know if that means that, they might not be flying people into Winnipeg. Maybe some of these quote unquote interviews are taking place, casually over a beer in Charlotte. I don't know. But we do know that Ryan Dinwiddie moments ago today indicated that their quarterbacks coach, Mike Miller, who, by the way, is not to be confused with special teams coordinator Mike Miller. They are two different people who happen to have the same name, who, by the way, has drawn absolute rave reviews from Chad Kelly and a number of those guys in Toronto, was requested by Winnipeg last month for an interview. Dinwiddie did not have any update beyond that. He also noted that Pete Costanza, who won a Grey Cup in Winnipeg in 2021 as an assistant and has subsequently moved to Toronto as a passing game coordinator and receivers coach, was not requested by the Bombers. So, Kahari Jones, moments before we started recording this, has signed with the UBC Thunderbirds of the U Sports ranks. He's going to be their quarterbacks coach. He's somebody who I thought was in the mix with Winnipeg, a guy who obviously is a local legend, still very close, from my understanding, with team president Wade Miller. But obviously Mike Miller, Toronto's quarterbacks coach, is in the ranks. I also suspect Jarius Jackson, former OC, interim head coach at Edmonton, will be in the mix, among a few other candidates. But your guess is as good as mine as to when this will get done. O'Shea likes to take his time with these types of moves, and he made it clear he is not in any rush.
Kahari just signed as the QB coach at UBC? Is
that
he
is
pissed
correct.
off everybody in the CFL? This guy has so much experience that seems, no disrespect, but sort of, I think he would be capable of a much bigger role on maybe a bigger level.
He did get fired after one season as the offensive coordinator in Ottawa, working with longtime, Winnipeg Blue Bombers assistant and a fellow Winnipeg native, or at least someone who also has strong Winnipeg connections in Bob Dice. Of course, Bob Dice being born here, Kahari Jones playing so many years for the Blue Bombers, winning an MOP award with the team in 2001. That being said, I do think that the star is probably worn off Kahari at least a little bit. I know that I was one of many members of the media who thought he got a bit of a raw deal in Montreal when he got fired after what I believe was just a 2-2 start to the season there back in 2022. That being said, I think he's got to work his way back in. Believe it or not, this fall, he was working as a professor at a small college in Oregon, teaching some business classes, which I don't think anybody had on their bingo card. I know that when I asked Kahari that and he told me, that I was taken aback. That was not what I anticipated. But anyway, he's somebody who I think is a great asset for UBC. That program has a lot of money behind it. Blake Nill, their head coach, is not one to rest, and that team had a first-round playoff exit in the Canada West Conference this past season. So I think Kahari Jones could very much help that UBC program in 2025.
John Hodge is with us from 3 Down Nation. Make sure to check out the website. Lots up right now at 3downnation.com, including this rant from Ed Hervey and much more from John and the team. Hey, listen, before we go, this upcoming season is the last year of Zach Collaros' contract. Huge year for Winnipeg, the organization, hosting the Grey Cup. They very clearly committed to Zach to be their guy and try and get back again and have a different result in the big game. But I just wanted your perspective on how you think the QB room will look next year. And will the Winnipeg Blue Bombers add to the room with a guy who will be sort of the heir apparent to Zach Collaros, or will it be sort of like it's been the last couple of years? And then assuming if Zach doesn't re-up and doesn't continue on, the team will be sort of a player in the free agent market next year for a guy that'll be the 2026 starting quarterback.
I mean, it's a great question, Huss. It's tough to read the tea leaves in terms of where guys will be come 2026. That being said, I mean, first things first is, does Zach want to keep playing beyond this upcoming season? He's obviously under contract for 2025. I'm sure he has the desire to win a Grey Cup at home, as many of his teammates have echoed. The question is, does he want to play beyond that? I don't have that answer from Zach. I think it's probably fair to speculate at that point that he might be done. He certainly had a Hall of Fame career. That being said, I almost wonder if that is part of the reason Winnipeg is looking at a guy like Mike Miller as their potential offensive coordinator. He has been credited with rejuvenating the career of Grey Cup MVP Nick Arbuckle. Obviously, he helped turn Chad Kelly into a CFL Most Outstanding Player, and in 2022, he helped McLeod Bethel-Thompson lead the CFL in passing touchdowns and, of course, win that Grey Cup as a starter. So if you're Winnipeg and you're looking, okay, not only for 2025, but what can we do to set ourselves up for success in 2026, whether it's Terry Wilson, a guy who just had his rookie season, played very sparingly, a little bit, ironically enough, in the Grey Cup, almost echoing what happened with Ryan Dinwiddie back in 2007. If he's the guy, then great. You invest another year in him as the backup. Maybe he's ready to start by 2026. If he's not the guy, I mean, this team brought in Darren Granger, who spent part of the season in 2024 on the practice roster. I think it's probably fair to say at this point that Chris Streveler is not the future franchise quarterback of this team. But I also think that Chris Streveler is a tremendous weapon, right? He is somebody whose running ability, I think, is better than any other quarterback in the CFL, save for maybe Trey Ford, who is a obviously completely different style of runner. Trey Ford is the fastest guy on the field. Chris Streveler, pound for pound, might be the toughest guy on the field, and it should be noted that he won his lone start in 2024, beating the Ottawa Redblacks at Princess Auto Stadium when Winnipeg desperately needed a win amid a poor start to the season. So if the Bombers are going to stand pat, right, it would be Collaros, Streveler, Wilson. Wilson, I guess, is maybe the guy of the future. I'll say this, though. The free agent market, I don't think right now, with Nick Arbuckle likely re-upping in Toronto, Jake Mayer already in Saskatchewan, there's not a lot that I think this club can realistically do to upgrade that spot in 2025, at least from CFL circles. Now, is there a chance they could bring in a guy from their neg list who could go on to CFL stardom? Absolutely. For example, I think Ian Book, who's bounced around the NFL, has been on Winnipeg's neg list for years. Maybe it's finally time for him to come up north. But right now, I don't think there's an easy answer for this will be the guy after Zach Collaros is done, whether that's post-2025 or a year or two after that.
John, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for doing this, and stay warm.
Thank you very much, Huss. You too.
Appreciate it. There's John Hodge. Check it out, 3downnation.com for everything 3-down football and more. All right, let's get Remo back in here. We got to get to the Coolbet lines. We have a very, very busy night tonight in the National Hockey League, as we often do on Tuesdays after a pretty quiet night last night, kind of seeding the way to the National Football League on the main stage.
Yeah, there were a couple of games, following LA, who was just here, went into Edmonton, another close, low-scoring game, and it was the Oilers winning 1-0 over Edmonton yesterday. I really didn't pay attention. I was very focused on the NFL, but there's 13 games tonight, headlined here, at least, by the Jets hosting the Canucks. I don't know what other games. I'm not going to watch the other ones. Maybe after I'll watch the Avs host the Rangers. They've been a bit of a fire this year, and Canadians and Utah. We'll get a good look at Utah next week.
Well, let's roll through it, and I'll fire you off the lines. It's a busy slate today. We hit a bunch of it in the lock shop today. If you want to check that out over on the Edmonton Sports Talk replay afterwards. Tampa's in Boston. Tampa's a -147 road favorite. Interesting. I haven't seen a number like that for a team visiting the Bruins in a while. Philly is a slight fave, -116 in Columbus against the Blue Jackets. Red Wings -189 faves at home against the Sharks. They've won 7 in a row since dropping their first game under Todd McClellan. Major new coach bump for the Wings. The Kraken and Penguins go at it in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh a -129 home fave. Dallas minus 123 favorites on the road in Toronto. Leafs a home dog tonight. Capitals big favorites against the Anaheim Ducks, minus 270. The Devils, minus 159 faves against Florida, who lost last night in regulation to Philadelphia. Ottawa, even money. Islanders, minus 118. Two young goalies going at it in this game, Reem. I'll be honest, I had to look up the Islanders goaltender for tonight's game. I'm just going to pull up his name again because, we were just getting introduced to, what was his name? Merelainen for Ottawa, who had the big weekend. He's going up against Marcus Hogberg, who I believe just has 2 NHL starts to his name. So pretty interesting goaltending matchup there between Ottawa and the New York Islanders. Vegas is in Nashville to take on the Preds. Vegas a minus 133 fave. The Calgary Flames are in St. Louis to take on the Blues. Blues minus 172. Calgary played yesterday. And then you've got we'll finish off with the Jets Canucks. Habs and Utah. Montreal has been really good as of late, finding ways to win. They're plus 130 on the road. And the Rangers are plus 130 in Colorado. Avalanche and Utah, both minus 154. But for tonight's game, the Jets, minus 159, home favorites to the Canucks. Lankinen and Hellebuck, the matchup. The total for the game is 5.5. This is a big chance for the Jets to kind of gain some momentum coming out of that Colorado game with 2 games off, Remo. And as we talk with Matt Sekeres, like the Canucks on any given night can look like the 50-win team from last year that won first place or a team that maybe is best suited to the lottery.
Yeah, I agree. Remember when we were in Vancouver, they had a couple for the Grey Cup.
That Islander game?
Yeah, they had some really bad performances, and they were playing all weekend. It was a wild schedule, and yeah, Vancouver, they were so good last year. They've had some injuries, had some leaves of absences. That was JT Miller stepped away, so I don't know what to expect from them, but the Jets, you think that they're going to continue this defensive structure that, 0 goals against Colorado on Saturday, and the Kings only managed, 1 in regulation on Friday. So you'd like to, keep it up. We're kind of anointing this Lowry Ehlers IFL line like the next best thing, but they've only played 1 game together. So let's see them get it together for another game and how it goes. And I'm looking forward to seeing Quinn Hughes. I've heard all about how, he's the Canucks MVP and how much better they are when he's on the ice. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do for Vancouver. So, but the Jets, we thought they would, they've got 6 of 10 on this homestand. I think that's pretty good. Maybe you'd like to see them do a bit better. So finish this up with a couple wins here. They are wearing the Heritage unis, which I think are going to look great. So yeah, you can finish this homestand up on a high note before heading out on the road next week. So I'm not sure which Canucks team we're going to see, but the Jets are favored. So Vegas thinks they're going to win.
Well, you mentioned, it's hard not to love what you saw in the first game from Ehlers Iafallo with Lowry in the middle. I'm just interested to see, A, who they're matched up against, coming off a pretty heady matchup against Nate McKinnon throughout Saturday night's game. I'm also very interested in what the visitors look like. Usually I'm totally focused in on the Jets, Remis, but, with everything that's been swirling around the Canucks so far this year, it'll be fun to get a look at Elias Paterson and his BFF, JT Miller, and how the rest of that squad looks. But it's always a treat to see Quinn Hughes. What a player he is.
Yeah, and I was excited for Vancouver to come here so we can have Matt Sekeres on and ask him, what the heck's going on here with this team? These guys were in first in the Pacific last year, and they can't figure it out. They can't coexist on the same power play. This is kind of ridiculous, and it was interesting that the coach and GM and captain have all acknowledged that there is an issue in the room, and I guess the first part of solving a problem is admitting that you have one. It just, I don't know what's going on. They were so good last year. There were such high hopes, and for Elliott to come on TV on Hockey Night in Canada and say they're looking at trading not one, but possibly both. Seems crazy. So we'll see what happens with them at the deadline. But first, we'll see what happens with them tonight. Canada Life Center, 7 p.m. puck drop.
Yeah, you got it. For you cool bettors out there, I just put in. We're going to kind of do a simple. I don't want to get too crazy tonight for our WST parlay. Jets to win. Kyle Connor goal. Josh Morrissey assist. I imagine that will probably be in the 4-1 range. But we'll get that up in the exclusives a little later on if you want to check that after the show. We did do a partner parlay in the lock shop today. We got a nice boost here on it too. We are taking the Detroit Red Wings in regulation against the San Jose Sharks. We're taking the St. Louis Blues against the Calgary Flames. And as a road plus 130 underdog, we're adding the Habs in Utah. That one is, when we made it, it was plus 180. It's boosted right now to plus 667. All your other favorite combo cards are out there. The shots, the points from the point, the lamplighters. And we've already even got a little bit of a few options for the weekend coming up and for the NFL. All that's over at Coolbet. We've also got night 2 of the TGL tonight. I will be riding with the Jupiter Lynx and Tiger Woods as plus 135 underdogs. I'll be PVRing that and checking it out after the game like I did last week. I believe that's on Sportsnet for those of you that are interested. And also looking forward to Leila Andy Fernandez and Felix Auger-Aliassime playing. Just pulling up Felix. He's got the long number. Felix is a big minus 303 favorite against Davidich Fokina. And then on the women's side, Leila Annie Fernandez is a big favorite, minus 667 against Buska. Chapo's already won his matchup. We had a nice little boosted parlay for the 3 Canadians to win yesterday, so I'll be keeping an eye on that. Of course, TSN has the Aussie Open as it continues. It's all there at Coolbet. Check us daily on the Lock Shop at noon on Edmonton Sports Talk before WST. And if you haven't played there before, use the promo code WST for a 100% bonus on your first deposit up to $200. Reem, I know we haven't talked curling in a while. Grand Slam of Curling actually is getting underway with all the top teams in the world. What a season for Carrie Anerson's club. They just added a player to replace Shannon Burchard, but some great news for Brianne Harris, who has had her doping ruling overturned. And I'm sure, listen, she still lost a lot of time and opportunities in the meantime, but I can't imagine what a relief that is for Brianne to be able to return to one of the top teams in the sport.
Yeah, Devin Haru of CBC Sports has with the very, very good report. He's the best for curling. And yeah, we found out of this boat last year, and I, like everyone, saying, hey, I've heard this before. I've heard every doping excuse. It's never anyone's fault.
One of our favorite topics.
It's what excuse can you come up with why you failed the test? We've heard it all. I've never believed any of them. And this one found to be true. She's not at fault for anti-doping rule violation. The ban was lifted. She was exposed to Legrandrol through the exchange of bodily fluids with her husband unknowingly. They don't say which bodily fluids, Hustler. So I don't know how this worked because they don't say. We can only speculate.
You have 2 children. I'm surprised you don't know how it works.
Well, I mean, I'm saying I don't know how it worked in this specific situation. I mean, I can speculate, but they just said they exchanged bodily fluids. And the one thing that surprises me, I'm surprised that she didn't know her husband was taking this whatever supplement. I mean, do they not live in the same household? They not have conversations? But hey, they investigated. They said she had taken all precautions, watching what she eats, watching what she put in her body, and I don't know what they made out or something. They went 7 minutes in heaven, and she was exposed to this and tested positive. Like what? Well, they just said
Don't have
exchange
details.
bodily
I'm
fluids.
pretty sure that. Well, I'm not even going to say it.
They said exchange bodily fluids. I don't know.
Yeah, that happens with adults all the time, particularly married ones. I mean, I kind of figured that this was something like this. Just the fact that she just had a kid. Like,
Is that related to the bodily fluid exchange?
It could that could have preceded having the kid. I think that is certainly possible. But I mean, and again, this is kind of funny coming from me with not a lot of experience on this topic, but I would imagine as a new mother and someone that played while pregnant for a while, probably pretty careful, not only because of all the rules of international curling and what's allowed and what isn't, but also for the health of the child. You're probably not firing in a bunch of horse tranquilizers or whatever the hell else is, not that is used in curling. And it does seem like sort of a strange sport, I guess, to be doping. But, I mean, when you're an Olympic sport, you got to play by the rules. And anyways, a crazy saga. I don't know what's to come from this because this probably complicates things quite a bit with the Einarson team moving forward. But for her in particular, just happy that she's no longer out of the sport and can get back to joining Carey and the rest of the crew as one of the top teams in the league. It must have been a brutal few months for her since this happened last year.
Yeah, and Devin Haru reports the ruling. It says she was exposed to Lagrandrall due to intimate contacts with her husband during the period when he was consuming the CrossFit stack, which contained the banned substance, and she was unaware he was taking it. And nor could she have known that intimate contact, use your imagination what that means, could have posed a risk of contamination. And I kind of agree with Tony and Chad. Like, why couldn't they figure this out last year? She just sit out a year for this. I mean, that's terrible. She did nothing wrong, and I guess tested positive through no fault of her own. They said she does not share food or drinks, either within her household or in public settings, ensuring the highest level of care to avoid contamination. So, I don't know, it's kind of disappointing that she was like the eve of the Scotties. They sent her home and said, you did this. And
that was insane. And the
screwed her team.
Secrecy around it. Yeah.
It was someone should pay for that. She should file for damages. That's terrible.
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if there could be something coming on the other side of it, but it wouldn't be an individual. It would be the COC. But to be honest, after everything she's been through, I think just the ability to resume her career and get back at it. We're getting into big time curling season here, closer to the Brier, closer to the Scotties, paying attention to the Grand Slam. It's really sad because, of course, we, just when Jeff was on, we talked about Ted and the event, the celebration of life for Wyman on Friday. He was so great covering the sport and loved it so much. And I loved having him on to get the latest on the roaring game. But we will stay on that. But that was the big news coming out of curling today that we wanted to make sure we mentioned. Well, listen, let's get after it tonight. Jets and Canucks, always a fun one. And don't forget, it's Thursday, our next WST night. Seattle Kraken in town. Thursday night game. Great night to go and have a couple beers. Watch the local pro team, one that is flirting with first place in the entire league. If you haven't already got your tickets for Thursday, why don't you join us? A great deal. The lowest price tickets. This is a C game, so I believe it's $61, and it includes a beverage, which you'll get through your Jets 360 app. So go over winnipegjets.com/WST. Grab a friend or two, grab your tickets, and join us. Myself, Remis, Connor, all there for the game on Thursday, and it should be a lot of fun. This show was a lot of fun. Thanks to the sponsors that make the show happen each and every day. All of you who joined us on YouTube. Shout out to you podcast listeners for getting through the entire production today. And a big thanks to Matt Sekeres, Jeff Hamilton, and John Hodge for jumping on the program. Canucks Jets tonight, 7 p.m. We'll be back tomorrow to break it all down with you. Ken Weeb's going to be on the program tomorrow for the latest coming. Oh, and we'll also have Kevin Woodley. And Woodley will be fun to talk about the Canuck-Jet game tonight, but also about Connor Hellebuyck. And I'm going to see if a goalie guy like Woodley can become an ally for our Helly for Heart movement that continues to get a little bit more steam every time Connor Hellebuyck goes out and takes the ice. So hopefully another win for Helly this evening. We'll talk about it tomorrow, 1 p.m., right here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Have a great night and enjoy the game.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.